I used to have a little sister called Alice. When I was a 14-year-old kid, I got myself knocked up. My mother, who had been a very young single mother herself, sat me down and explained some of the things she'd gone through with me and how hard it had been. She told me she wanted to raise the baby as her daughter, and I would be a big sister. At the time, I wasn't exactly happy, but I didn't really have another option. I spent 6 months off school with an eating disorder, and during that time, Alice was born. I didn't want to detract at all from Alice's happiness, but there were times I really wanted to tell her. I wanted to cuddle her into me and tell her how much I loved her and that I was her mother. I never got the chance. When I was 21, I was in a much more stable position than ever before. I rented a little apartment and was in the process of decorating it. The nicest bedroom was to be Alice's. I still wanted to tell her everything. My mother and I had a couple blazing rows about it. In the end, I agreed to keep quiet because I think my mother was probably right, and I would have been selfish to turn that little girl's life upside down to fulfill my own emotional needs. September 2003, age 7. She was playing in my mom's front garden when a drunk driver plowed into the garden wall, knocking it over onto her. I rushed to the hospital the moment as I got the call from my mother, but as soon as I walked into the emergency ward and saw the look on my mother's face, I knew it was too late. We were both utterly devastated. The next few weeks was a bit of a blur, but during that time, it was my birthday. I hadn't even remembered until I saw the envelope on the doormat in my new place. I hadn't bothered finishing Alice's room. It was still half decorated with Disney princess wallpaper. I'd come home from the hospital that night and just shut the bedroom door. I couldn't bear to look in there because it drove home what might have been. I opened the envelope with a complete lack of interest. How unfair was it that I got to have another birthday when my beautiful Alice never would? There were 2 cards in there, one from my mother, and the other to the best sister in the world, and in her uneven childish writing, "Love from Alice." My heart just about stopped in my chest. I can't even begin to describe the mixture of feelings I had, somewhere between shock and heartbreak. After standing there, just staring at it for what felt like an age, I rang my mom. I knew how fragile she had been too, so I just gently asked her how come there was a card from Alice. It turned out my mother, ever organized, had bought the cards and had written them out a couple of weeks early. She told me she'd debated whether to send the one from Alice, but had decided I would probably like to see it. Over the next 6 months, my mother seemed to go downhill. I was devastated at the loss of my child, but somehow I managed to put one foot in front of the other and keep going. My mother couldn't. When I went to visit, she'd be sad and disheveled. Her house would be a mess, and she lost her job. I was in so much pain of my own, I resented it. How dare she need me to help her when it was my child that was taken? The final straw for me was Mother's Day 2014. There on my doormat was a blank envelope, and when I opened it, I was shocked to see a Mother's Day card. Inside, in the familiar childish handwriting, said, "Love from Alice." I was furious. However well-meaning my mother had been, it was just sick, recycling one of her old Mother's Day cards from my daughter. I felt like she was rubbing salt into the wound. Alice had never known I was her mother. My heart was broken all over again. I rang my mother and played Merry Hell. How dare she? Didn't she know how hard this had been for me? I called her selfish and told her she'd basically stolen my baby from me. All the pent-up frustration from over the years just spumed out of me in a vile and hateful rage. She tried to say she hadn't done it, but I told her she had been so out of it most of the time, she wouldn't have a clue if she had. The next day, my mother overdosed. A neighbor found her a couple of days later. After that, my world collapsed. What little strength I'd had to go on seemed to escape me. I couldn't forgive myself for that stupid row. I knew how much pain my mother had been in, and in her befuddled way, she tried to do something nice, and I'd torn strips off her. I had to have some time off work because I couldn't function anymore. Just getting out of bed in the morning seemed like such a struggle. It wasn't worth it most days. I would look in the mirror and see the same look on my face that I'd seen on my mom's after Alice died. Yesterday was my birthday. When I finally surfaced at about 2 p.m, there on my mat was a card and a small, beautifully wrapped gift. I felt utterly numb. I slowly undid the pink bow and peeled off the wrapping paper. It was a bottle of pills, the same ones my mother had overdosed on. Her name was even on the label. I opened the card, and written in my mom's handwriting were the words, "We miss you." And underneath, in childish handwriting, the words, "Love from Alice."